Thank you. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Instrumental Breakthroughs, a podcast that explores the psychedelic origin stories of your favorite creative superheroes. I'm your host, Daniel Shankin of Tam Psychedelic Integration. Tam Integration is a sweet and loving community organization that works to support people who are deeply committed to their transformation and growth, often supported by psychedelic sacraments and medicines. And you're joining us here live on Deadhead Land. I'd like to thank Brian of Deadhead Land. You can visit them on Deadhead Land everywhere, support them on Patreon and the like. And would also like to thank Skylar over at Livestream Remote. I'm really excited to have our guest today. I didn't tell you this beforehand, but our guest today has consistently been the #2 most listened to artist on my Spotify for many years running. #1 being, of course, the Grateful Dead. Hard to unseat.
What an honor.
So that's pretty. Those are my listening habits. So I love your bio on your website, which says, Rab was born. He began to experiment with sound. The back of his head fell on the ground. Sound was released from the thump. It was deafening and created around him the first note of random Rab's music. A few other notes, a lot of people know Rab from his sunrise sets at Burning Man, from being all over the electronic music scene all up and down the West Coast. Probably has played in, I believe with world music ensembles. He's played with heavy metal groups. He's played with country groups. His work obviously spans genres and communities. And I'm really happy to have you here. Thank you so much.
Well, thanks for having me, Daniel. It's an honor to be here.
Yeah. So I am curious about the back of your head fell on the ground. Is that a real story? Is that true?
It is true. Actually, I was, I was listening to music all throughout my childhood, very musically oriented household, but I didn't really hear music. I was just kind of interested in it. And then my dad had a record, 45 of the Chariots of Fire soundtrack. I don't know if you know that song. It's like anyway, I was
right, and the running on the beach.
Yes. So I put that soundtrack on and was pretending to conduct the orchestra with the chopstick and in the living room. And then I felt the power of music and just kind of like passed out in a way and just fell over on the ground. And it was the greatest feeling I'd ever had. And I just wanted to recreate that feeling over and over again. So I just kept playing that record and until like the record didn't work anymore. And I had to start finding new ways to get that feeling. And I feel like that's exactly what I'm doing to this day, is just hunting down how to get that feeling again.
Wow. So you had, I guess, what we would call like an endogenous experience,
Endogenous, yes.
right? It just sort of happened independently of any sort of particular practice or particular chemical, or it just, you were just taken over
Hmm.
by the chariot of fire.
Yeah. Exactly.
And so, one of the places we do start is, and this is a really cool reference point. That's a really great data point. What happened when you started to, you know, mix psychedelics into the picture?
Well, interestingly, like, I have I had a 4-track tape recorder, and I would record, kind of started making my own music in high school, and I was
Hmm.
doing a lot of like folk music, and kind of I was interested in acoustic guitar and just
Hmm.
songwriting. And I remember listening back to some of my old tapes, and there was a moment where, when I first took mushrooms, everything after that point, the music completely changed. And it was just really
Hmm.
interesting. I didn't even realize it until I kind of looked back on it one day, and it's like, wow, there was like this. Even my tapes themselves, I started drawing on them, and just being way more experimental. Started writing like 10-minute songs, and instead of these little 3-minute compositions. So yeah, it
Right.
was a big shift.
And was there something that you can point to inside the experience itself,
Inside the
the mushroom
taking,
experience?
yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I mean, it was so I had just come to Oregon for the first time, and I met this girl at a coffee shop, and we just started talking, and there was like this homeless guy, older homeless man, and she had this feeling all of a sudden she wanted to buy him flowers, so she went and bought this guy a bunch of flowers, and then and he was so elated, and he was like, thank you, and he's like, take this, and he gave her a bag of mushrooms.
Hmm.
And I had never tried mushrooms before, and so I went to the the coast, redwoods. I'd never seen redwoods before. Went by myself, and
Where'd you
then
grow up?
I grew up in Indiana.
Okay,
Yeah,
great.
so
So
I,
from Indiana to the Oregon coast.
yeah, exactly. I hadn't really ever experienced anything like that before, and ate a handful of mushrooms, and started, seeing for the first time in that way, and just had the most, that this feeling of just being connected to nature, and to the ocean, and to life, in a way that I'd never felt before. I always say, like, I went into it being an atheist, and I came out being something completely different. Um, but I know it sounds really cheesy but this is what happened for me, is that I was just kind of crying in joy, looking at the sunset, and I asked the sunset and the sky, like, what do you want to do with my life? What should I do with my life? And I heard the word music, just like
Mm,
music. And I knew at that point that, of all my passions, that was the one that I needed to pursue. And I've been
that is
pursuing it ever
amazing. So
since.
the sunrise was your career counselor.
Yeah. Absolutely.
That is pretty freaking cool. What year was that?
That was 98, 97, 98. Around there.
Cool.
Yeah.
Right, right. I just asked, I ended up in Oregon from the East Coast in like 94,
Uh-huh.
and it was, yeah, unlike anything else. Really,
Yeah.
really, really amazing stuff. And so did you start off like, what were you playing back then? What sort of music? What was it like? And how was it informed by this?
Well, like I said, I at that point I was just using a 4-track tape recorder,
Hmm.
and was pretty limited. I didn't have any kind of tools beyond my guitar and my voice, and so I started just kind of I would lay down the kick drum with my throat, and make whatever sounds I could find, and just start
Hmm.
layering guitar and different sounds. And like I said, I was still doing more guitar centric kind of music at that point.
Sure.
Um, but it really got me interested in just sound at that point, and exploring techno. And I realized that my instrument wasn't really the guitar or even my voice or anything. It was the 4-track. That was my instrument. I felt most comfortable in that technological realm. So as
Mm-hmm.
time went on, you know, it's hard to find a drummer. So I was in a duo, and so we bought a drum machine and got a couple synths and did that,
Mm-hmm.
acquired a bunch of stuff, and then that project ended, and then I was stuck with all this gear, and that's when I started producing music. Like at that point, still didn't have a computer, so it was all just like sequencing with MIDI, and so all my live
Right.
shows were very complicated, and I had charts, and it's really difficult to keep. And my songs would sometimes go on for 15 minutes because transitioning with that gear was very difficult. So, but it forced me to explore sound in a whole new way.
Right. I mean, there is something about difficulty.
Mm-hmm.
What do they say? A smooth seas never made skilled sailors.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Also, like you're challenged by the limitations of whatever equipment you have, and so you have to work within the bounds of. You can't do things that you want to do. You have to do what you're capable of, and that forces you to find the best sound you can over whatever device you're working with.
And so, how has that changed over time, and how do you find that that's still to be true?
Well, interestingly, it's almost like, I mean, right now, being an electronic artist, I mean, we're living it's like the golden era. There's so many options. It's possible. I mean, I can stir up an orchestral piece just sitting here in my studio by myself. And so you're really only limited by your imagination, which can be kind of overwhelming. You have to learn to focus your energy as opposed to just kind of throwing everything at the wall all the time. And actually peeling back and going simple is kind of the biggest challenge, really. Like, how do I simplify? A lot of times, like now I'll write a song and like my original version will have just way too much going on. And then I just kind of have peel away until there's something left, like the kind of the bare bones are left.
Right. It's that other sort of, I'm picturing sort of the two ways of sculpting, and one is sort of by assembly and one is by, carving away.
Exactly. I think of that too, like kind of a marble sculpture in a way.
But it seems like what you're saying is that you kind of bounce between the two. You kind of build it up, you peel it back, you build it up, you peel it back.
Yeah. It's interesting because it's, as time goes on, I'm more and more interested in simplicity, just kind of the basic principles of because music is a mystery. Like, I don't even know what music is. I don't think anybody really knows what's happening. We know there's vibration of air happening, but beyond that, it's a complete mystery. And it's really easy to overthink it and think that in order to make good music, it needs to be extremely complicated. But really, just a beautiful tone in the right way can stimulate something in anyone. It just feels good. It just feels really good to hear something beautiful. So I'm hunting beauty now more than I am hunting, I guess, complexity.
Right. And I think that's a good way to go. And I think that is some of what's really nice about your music, is that and what you said is that it feels beautiful. And so that there's this real, there's vibrating happening, in the air that your mind interprets, but somehow there's a somatic sense to it too. So it's like, why does the body feel good? Because the sounds are happening.
Well, what's very interesting to me about it is that I'll spend, an entire night working on a piece that makes me feel a certain way. And then when I finally share it, other people, when they connect with it, feel the same. And that is really interesting to me, that there's some sort of connection that we all have to these sounds. Like, why is it that when it makes me feel relaxed, it makes someone else feel relaxed? Like, what's the connection there?
Right. That there's some sort of shared humanity, which in our world quite often, in a world where there's so much alienation, and, you must remember that old, like the high school stoner thought problem of, how do I know that the red I'm looking at is the same red you're looking at?
Yep.
how do I know that the beauty that I feel in my body is the same as the beauty that you feel in your body? But seemingly, it's pretty close, right? Seemingly it evokes the same thing.
Mm-hmm. It's an incredible thing that the shared experience, especially like on a dance floor, it's almost like you
Mm-hmm.
can see kind of a central heartbeat of the vibe of the
Right.
crowd. And if you're in tune with that, you kind of know what the crowd is feeling, which is a really
Right.
different than looking at an individual and being able to like read their facial expressions and whatnot. And somehow you can just scan the crowd and get a sense of the vibe and where they're
Mm-hmm.
going up and down. And
Well, this makes me think of, Rupert Sheldrake and the morphogenetic field,
mm,
where he says that there are these fields of like information that we live in that affect us in a way that's non-local and not particularly rational, initially rational. And one of the things that he points to is when birds are migrating, there'll be like these swarms of little birds and they will, fly this way and that way. And they turn on a dime, and schools of fish too, will go over rocks and under rocks in places that they've never been before. And yet they don't bump into each other.
mm-hmm.
And there are times when I'm on the dance floor, when the music's right and I'm surrounded by I'm surrounded by the people I'm supposed to be around. And we're all dancing as hard as we can, and limbs might be flailing and we might be switching spots and things like that. And nobody bumps into each other.
Mm-hmm.
Like everybody knows where they're supposed to be at any given time.
Yeah, I just saw this study that they did in Japan where they crowd dynamics of people like crossing the street in these super crowded, and how they form these we just naturally form lanes and can navigate crowds. But if they give a couple people in that crowd a cell phone and give them a small task to work on their cell phone as they cross the street, then it completely disrupts that whole flow, because
Right.
they're tuned out, and how just all it takes is like 3 people and then the entire thing just falls apart. So
Wow.
once we're tuned into something else, we lose our sense of that instinctual sense to stay a part of the flock.
Right. Which you also see in, I guess most often I'm thinking like developing countries or like India or Vietnam, where they show you like a footage of traffic patterns.
Mm-hmm.
And there are no traffic lights and there's no lanes to speak of. And, there's a 7-way intersection, and everybody just seems to be able to navigate it pretty well.
Yeah.
And so you are then, and then, so that's all totally decentralized, seemingly, something like traffic is totally decentralized, schools of fish decentralized. But when it comes to people on the dance floor, there is a conductor, and that is seemingly you. Or are you just a victim like everybody else?
I like to think of it as I'm at my highest power when like completely transparent, when there's kind of just letting things through and the way they're supposed to be. And really the biggest mistake I can often make is getting in the way. I like to think of music as the master and I'm just the student, and I'll always be the student, because like I was saying before, the mystery of like even what is happening, it's almost as if the music is sort of it's what keeps the universe together. It's what keeps the planets floating around the sun. It's what everything is based upon, kind of these musical principles. And so all we're doing is sort of amplifying what's already there. And when it happens right, it just sort of lubricates the division between the points of perception that we all have, and somehow brings people together. But yeah, I guess as you're kind of I guess the word conductor, it's more like I'm almost like, I feel like I'm more of a taxi driver, just like picking a route through some composition that already exists.
I think I chose the word conductor. It was a callback to your days with
yes.
The Chariots of Fire record. So you're a taxi driver picking the route. Can you take that one step deeper?
Um, it's a whole different. It's interesting because there's like kind of two facets to as a music producer. One is the complete isolation that I
Mm-hmm.
have in my studio, where I'm really going kind of explore, like I feel like I'm in a spaceship sometimes exploring the cosmos and
Mm-hmm.
just finding all the different hidden corners that are shrouded in darkness and shining light on them. And it's a
Mm-hmm.
feeling of discovery and real excitement. And then after a while, it sort of feels like I made that trip. I know where it goes. I come back and then I share it with an audience. And at
Mm-hmm.
that point, I feel like I'm more presenting a path
Right.
and kind of hoping for the best. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. It's kind of a crapshoot. And sometimes the same piece of music will just go, people will love it. And then other times it'll be kind of boring or it just won't be the right moment. And some
Mm-hmm.
songs actually, it's like, I'll play them out and it'll be like no reaction. And then I'll just I'll just put it in my hard drive. And then a couple years later, I'll pull it out again. And then all of a sudden it's like, it's time came and something changed with the culture or with the vibe, or I have no idea. And then so it's kind of a mystery to me of like why and how it all works. But there's definitely something about time that plays a role with it,
Mm-hmm.
because it's really, music is like the only real art form that is time. It plays with time. You can't pause a song and admire a moment. You have to experience it through time. And there's never a moment. It's always in the now, I guess. And
Mm-hmm.
sometimes the now changes and the song is more appropriate for that now. It's if I were to play a down tempo track at midnight on New Year's Eve, really slow, dreamy track, people would probably be very upset with me. I have to find the now and figure out what the now needs to fully operate.
Interesting. So what are some of the qualities of now that you've discovered?
The qualities of now. I mean,
Because
it's
apparently it's different from now to now.
it is. I think that it's almost as if, like, a lot of times, like, some of the musical effects we use are based on time, right? So like echo,
Mm-hmm.
it kind of creates this sort of trailing or reverb, whatever, creates space and whatnot. So when you're messing with echo and things like that, you're messing with time, and you're stimulating like a thought, like a musical moment, and then reminding you get a reminder, oh, remember that good sound that you liked so much? Well, here it is again, and here it is again,
Mm-hmm.
here it is again. So you're stretching and pulling time, it feels like. And sometimes I actually feel like maybe on I don't know what the word is, a mystical level, that you actually are messing with time, and then things will kind of bubble up, thoughts or memories, or even maybe some like slight clairvoyance that will happen around, and you kind of open this chasm where time becomes distorted. And
Mm-hmm.
because really, I believe that, there's no way to prove this or know this for a fact, but the whole idea of linear time is more like a construct it's like a way of perceiving reality that we're built with as humans. And
Right.
so linear time is this thing, but really, does it exist? I'm not convinced. So when we play with time, and music is my tool to play with it, it kind of unveils the linearity, I'm not sure if I said that word
Right.
right, of time itself. And it can kind of be a little bit of it can a head scratcher sometimes, like, what is really going on with time? And that's part of the fun of exploring it with music.
Right. I mean, it just sort of makes me, I've certainly had experiences where it seems like the projector is broken, right? And a projector in terms of this thing that shows one frame at a time.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just sort of like, oh, I'm outside the projector, like I'm outside the running of the reel.
Yeah.
And
It's a good way to look at it.
it can be very unsettling
Uh-huh.
because that's not where I'm designed to be.
Yeah. Exactly.
Sort of this organism was sort of designed to sort
Uh-huh.
of um, live in this particular type of illusion, at least for now. But I do know what you mean. And it is interesting to kind of see those things unravel and jump and sort of slide into a place that's infinite, is another way of looking at it. And the middle of the dance floor is a place where many of my encounters with the infinite have occurred. And again, it sometimes seems to be shared, because I come back from the infinite and I'll look at my friend who's next to me and they'll be like,
yeah,
it's sort of like, well, that puts things in perspective.
Yeah.
I guess it's a question of perspective, right? It's like, where are you looking at time from?
Well,
what do you think about that? It's like,
yeah. Well, I was just gonna. We were just talking about the thing. I was working with some of the Ram Dass words in my music for a project, and there was this whole kind of thing he went on where he's, pulling in the whole the teachings of Einstein and relativity, and that's really where that's what it's all relative. There is no sort of anchor that we can sort of look to as the 0 point. So it's really all in a way. I mean, I'm not really into solipsism, but I do think that there is a sort of where our perception is that defines where our reality is, and it's all relative all the time. And so as we play with relativity, we can put ourselves in different places, I guess, to perceive it in a new way.
Right. I only like solipsism from the point of view of non-duality. I'm the only one who's here, but so is everybody else.
Yeah. It's like omni-solipsism or something.
Yeah, omni-solipsism, I believe, is my new religion. So we hit this first trip on the Oregon coast, which is, for my money, probably one of the best places to take mushrooms on the planet. Other than right here, right now. What are there some other experiences that have sort of pushed your creativity forward that come to mind?
Yes. So, I mean, there's been quite a few for sure, but there's definitely a few that stand out. I think that each substance, each psychedelic has a different role that it kind of plays and how it changes your understanding of music. I think that, the mushrooms are really good to help you connect with sort of the movement of nature and the interconnectedness of nature and your relationship to nature. And whereas in a way, I feel like LSD is like a tool to see reality as it actually is. And you can get inside of music and almost see it as a three-dimensional object.
Right.
And that really helps you understand how the details help frame the shape of the object that you're working with. I went to a psytrance festival in Australia, and my friend gave me a really powerful dose of LSD, and I wasn't really even into psytrance. He's like, no, trust me, you're gonna go to this stage at this time, take the acid at this point, and you're gonna have an experience like you've never had before. And sure enough, just dancing with this crowd of international, like tons of Japanese and whatever, everybody speaking different languages, and feeling just completely connected to every single person and making eye contact and seeing three-dimensionality of music. And you know how psytrance has that kind of absurdly incessant beat, just constantly, and
kind of, but I have not, I'm really surprised because it's the kind of stuff that I just avoid desperately.
Yeah. Oh,
I think, I would every once in a while I forget, and I think to myself, oh, I'll probably like this because it says Psy in the front.
Yeah.
Because the name Psytrance
Yeah.
sounds like something I would like, and then it's just, oh, it's not. But I'm really interested to hear, from somebody else who's not a Psytrance fan, to hear that they ate a bunch of LSD and it made sense to them. And so you were talking about this beat.
Yeah. So when you hear Psytrance, if you're not a big fan of Psytrance already, the reason you might not like it is because it's super repetitive and the beat just kind of just goes on and on and on, right? And it's sort of like, well, why would I want to listen to something like this? When you are taking a strong dose of really good LSD, what happens is you don't actually hear the beat anymore. It goes away. And what I feel like what happens is it kind of taps into your lizard brain. It's such a basic, the tempo and the beat sort of just disappear. And all you hear are all the other elements floating around the beat. And I can't really explain it, but what seemed really dark and obnoxious becomes relaxing and like I said, it's primal. It really brings you into a part of your brain that is more archaic. And it feels really phenomenal. And I mean, of course, that only lasts for about 7 hours, and then if you're stuck at the festival for 7 days, like I was, by the end of it, I was, like, no, I can't do this anymore. But for that little window there, it all made complete sense. I tried to actually make some Psytrance songs. I did. I've messed around with it, but yeah, it's the kind of thing where it's like, unless I'm in that moment in the right, chemical state of mind, then it's not really my thing anymore.
Well, then that brings me to another question. Why do people gravitate towards particular kinds of music? Because we know is that there are people who don't care about music, and there's some people who sort of casually listen to whatever's on the radio, and then there are people who are like fiercely, aggressively dedicated to Psytrance, the Grateful Dead, random rap, whatever it is. How does that happen?
I don't know, but what I have discovered though is that, so I've actually been blessed to have become friends with all different kinds of musicians and different genres and different things. And I know some people that play music kind of more as a tool to succeed in a certain genre, but it isn't necessarily who they are as a person. So they're like, they want to be a big dubstep artist or something, but they don't really even like the music. And therefore, when they get off stage and they become accosted by their own audience, they don't like the people at their shows. And they feel sort of like disconnected and annoyed. And that's where I think a lot of artists kind of get into that, like, oh, he's an asshole or egomaniac or whatever, because they're actually not playing who they are as a person. And I actually had some people like kind of like express like, man, I kind of wish I played down tempo like you, because then I wouldn't have to deal with all these obnoxious meatheads or whatever. I feel really blessed because I do play music that I try to make music that is kind of coming from my heart and represents who I am as a person. And so when I meet people at shows, 99% of the time, they're like my friends. Like if they're a fan of my music, then we're friends. And it's kind of incredible as I get to tour around and meet people from all over the country and the world, is that anyone who gravitates to my sound is someone I can relate to. And it's sort of like, those are my people, I guess, or we're the same ilk, and I'm not sure why that happens, but I guess we're all seeking something out of the music. Sometimes it's an escape, sometimes it's to look inward. I had one criticism from somebody that stood out to me, and he came to one of my shows and he's like, I don't know, your music makes me think too much. And I thought that was really interesting. I was like, okay, for me, that's like a sign of what I want to kind of think too much and make that a part of my experience with it. But I can totally see how some people just want to escape and they don't want to maybe do any kind of internal work. and so they're going to be turned off by that sound.
Right.
So there's
Well,
a
yeah, I
lot there.
mean, you seem like a community guy. You know, it just sort of seems like, well, and that's kind of some of the nice things about, I was never a big Burning Man. I just never really did a lot of Burning Man, any. Um, but you know, it just seems like the kind of the visionary art and music community that came out of that is like really tight and close,
Mm-hmm.
and sort of kind of really into kind of growing and supporting each other. You know, like your work with Jones,
Mm-hmm.
you know, is like kind of really nice to see, kind of as kind of that whole, not a system, movement kind of comes more and more into the zeitgeist. You know, your guys' work ends up in the fine art museums now.
It's getting there. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's starting to kind of penetrate. And you are right that it is a community. It's a very strong community. I miss my community because of all this COVID shit, but the overall, the feeling of community is really strong, and there's a lot of genuine love there. And you know, every once in a while some ego will pop up or we'll have some conflicts, but for the
Shocker.
most, yeah, for the most part it is incredibly fluid and incredibly supportive, and there's a bond there that that I thrive off of. And I you know, some artists will tour and they don't really have a community, they just kind of have an audience that comes to their shows, whereas it's the opposite for me. I need my community. I need the community to be a part of it. It makes such a difference. And when I succeed or when I have a great set, it's there's so many parts of that wheel that need to turn in order for that to happen, and so many people involved and so much giving and so much work from hundreds of people to really make it all a success. So I can't really take even credit for it. It's just kind of like we all play a little part in this larger thing that we've all built together.
Right. And so what are some of the things that you feel like fosters that?
I think just
and
like,
or how,
oh yeah, go ahead.
and so what are some of the things that foster that, and why is it psychedelics? I'm just kidding.
No. Well,
Yeah.
I mean,
and you know, how does that play a role, if at all?
It plays a massive role. I mean, it's everybody in this scene that has really come to terms with what it's all about has more than likely had a really powerful psychedelic experience that brought them there. It's sort of the turning point for so many. Now, I think that once you go to that place, you maybe don't need them anymore, but it does seem to play a role in getting you there to help open your eyes to what's possible. And I think that if you do truly go deep with and have that powerful psychedelic experience, you see love and you see the force of love playing a role. And so that that lends itself to community. So does it play a part? Absolutely. Is it still playing a part? Totally. It's changing. There's more psychedelics out there now that have different facets to what we see. I think that, you know, the emergence of DMT and ayahuasca has played a big part in changing the community and really creating a more ceremonial journey, instead of just going out in the woods with your friends and eating, you know, whatever, and then but doing like an actual ceremony and intersecting with I guess South American shamanism and how that those teachings of kind of ancient cultures that have been using psychedelics for thousands of years, you know, and and kind of trying to integrate some of those lessons into our culture is really important. Yeah, but it's like I said, it's a huge, it's I mean, there's no doubt about it. Psychedelics plays a massive role in what keeps this whole machine turning when in the festival scene.
Right. Indeed. Yeah, sometimes it pays for the festival itself.
Yeah, sometimes it does in ways that we don't talk about.
Sorry. forget I said that. I was just kidding. So pandemic life,
Mhm.
music in the time of a pandemic. There hasn't been any touring. Perhaps there's been some recording, perhaps there's been some collaboration. What has that been like for you?
Um, it was very difficult at first, and I don't want to sit here and whine about my life being any more difficult than all the people that have lost loved ones or had to
Mm-hmm.
deal with major losses in their life financially. And um, I feel lucky in that my music sales and stuff have helped me kind of stay afloat. And interestingly, I thought I was in a lot more despair until I realized that my expenses are so low because of all this stuff that I'm actually pretty much have the same amount of money that I did, because I just, when you're touring and doing all these traveling, you end up just throwing cash in the wind.
Mm-hmm.
So it's helped me sort of streamline my life. And one of the most amazing parts about it is that because pre-pandemic my life was on the road, my friendships were on the road too, and like all my community I would just see people. I didn't have to plan it, it just was there.
Mm-hmm.
And now I have to plan, and I'm very I've become closer with my close friends and become more integrated into my smaller community, and that's been helping me stay afloat. We've been doing some smaller events here and there, some socially distanced things.
Mm-hmm.
I feel really lucky. Like, we are going back to the community thing. Like, I couldn't, I feel like for instance, like if you're a cello player from the Met Opera or something, you don't really have anything you can do right now. You don't
Right.
have a community that it's all falling apart, and so you're doing nothing. And these people are some of the most brilliant musicians in the world. I am just this guy that happens to have a community of yoga and all different types of things that can happen during this, that being a part of a community has helped me immensely stay afloat. And
Right.
as we are starting to emerge from this, I'm feeling the community really coming together now more than ever, and really getting excited about what's next. Um, so it's been a big learning lesson. And yeah, I have finally been able to, I have a newer studio now that I've been really diving deep in. So I'm almost done with another album right now. And
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I'm really grateful to have this time to work. And I needed a break too. It can get kind
Right.
of crazy on the road. You kind of get burnt out and you don't even realize it. So I've actually been
Yeah.
trying to, I'm savoring this last few months of all this stuff, because I know once it's over, I might actually miss it a little bit.
Right. What, yeah, I mean, what has been possible? Like, you're saying that you didn't even realize you were so burnt out. What does that realization look like, and what do you do about it?
I think I mean, you have to stay in tune. It's mind, body, spirit. All those things have to be taken care of in
Mm-hmm.
order to continue to do this lifestyle.
Right.
And it's really easy to let one of those things or multiple things fall away.
Yeah.
Um, Burning out, a lot of times, it's sort of like overstimulating the part of your brain that feels good.
Right.
um and you're playing multiple events, and you get kind of high off of the just being there, and then you kind of crash and get high again. And I mean, like, I mean, not necessarily with substances, just off the experience, right? And
Mm-hmm.
over time, you sort of need those experiences in order to feel good, because then you're just down, 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 and you need a show to kind of pull you out. And I think that's when it starts to you get kind of burnt out, is when the crashes, and it's the up and
Mm-hmm.
down of it, right? Um, so I think taking a break was what I needed to really tune in, to find balance within myself. And yeah, so it's like now I feel like I'm not in need of that as much as I once
Right.
was.
Well, what can you do to maintain sustainability as things open up? You go back out on the road, and how do we make sure it doesn't happen again?
I think it's just like less desperation
Mm-hmm.
to do say yes to everything. I think that's
Okay.
really where I'm at with it. Um, for instance, I'm not sure if I really want to do like a East Coast fan tour. Like when that opportunity comes, I might just not do it, because there's something about driving all the way out to the East Coast and the traffic and the kind of the grind.
Mm-hmm.
For some reason, every time I'm done with an East Coast tour, I'm toast. It just
Yeah, I
crushes
bet.
me every time. And things like that, where I'm like, maybe I should just do what I love and go to the places. I mean, I love going to the East Coast and whatnot, but I just feel like I don't really want to play a random bar in Pittsburgh on a Tuesday night anymore. I'd rather do the special things.
Oh, I got to tell you, it seems insane to me that you would do something like that.
Yeah, well,
I
you
mean,
just
that's nice for the people in Pittsburgh, I guess.
yeah, and it's always worth it, and I guess, but there's it can grind you down. I think you just get kind of sucked into the, I don't think people realize that, but pre-pandemic, the music scene was just completely saturated,
Mm-hmm.
and the touring schedules, and there were just so many DJs and so many producers, and it was very kind of competitive.
Oh,
And
there's almost like a fight for relevance.
exactly, and you get sucked into that mindset, and you're like, you just got to like say yes to everything and grind yourself down. And I think this has helped me take a
or
step
it
back and
or it
find my
all
place in
falls
it.
apart.
Yeah, yeah, it's all gonna
If I
fall
don't
apart.
play a bar in Pittsburgh, my career
Yep,
is over.
exactly. Which is just a self-created illusion.
Yeah. No, I get it. I mean, and that is that's a prevalent thing. That if I don't do anything, I fall into it, for freelancers, for creatives, independent creatives. Yeah, if I don't take advantage of all of it, it's all going to fall apart. It could all fall
Mm-hmm.
apart at any moment.
I think it's important when you're like in your like early 20s or something, and you're kind of
Right.
trying to get started, grind away, like do it. Like that's when you can build something. But the whole reason you're building something is so you can at some point enjoy it and take
Right.
a step back and really get into a flow with it that works for your life. And
Right.
but you don't want to stay in that 20-year-old mindset for the rest of your life and just get completely burnt.
Right. And I think that's the same thing that you were saying our relationship to psychedelics change.
Mm-hmm.
It's like I don't do them the way I did when I was 20.
No.
That would be bad.
Yeah.
What did you say? My mind, body, and spirit would not like that.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's almost like now, I don't really need the big blowouts like I used to, where I just completely
Mm-hmm.
obliterate existence in order to, it's something that I occasionally will seek out.
Mm-hmm.
But now it's like my usage of it is quite often more on the micro level.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that I've been experimenting with lately is I got this one of those DMT pens,
Okay.
and I'll be working on a track and I'll need an outside perspective and just take a small hit of that DMT and just listen to the song, and just it
Mm-hmm.
helps you sort of step away and see it, and then by the time the song's over, you're already pretty much back to your normal state of
Right.
consciousness, and it just gives you a little tool to kind of tweak things out.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it doesn't get much more outside than that
Mm-hmm.
as far as outside perspectives go.
Yeah.
Let's see what the elves think of this.
Yeah. Well, a lot of times it points out what's annoying, right? So a lot of times it's like
Right.
that's what it does. It doesn't help me often see what's beautiful. It helps me see what's not. And that is a
Right.
really important thing. And so you kind of peel away like, oh gosh, that sound, gosh, I didn't even realize how obnoxious that sound was. And then you just take it out. And so it's a good.
I love that. I mean, that is something Tim Leary has the book Psychedelic Prayers. And, he talks about noticing, what stands out, like, he says, tension and arrogance and, pride, he lists them as sort of qualities of inner being. But, I can see, I mean, we all know the experience of being in a state and you give the wrong person control of the
Mm-hmm.
iPad,
Mm-hmm.
the iPod, or just by accident something comes on and you're like, oh, that doesn't work at all.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really nice that more musicians are tuned into these things that you don't just think are going to work but have been tested.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
you
that's
know
true. Yeah, it's the testing ground.
and are kind of also just created by people who have enough experience in that space to know.
Mm-hmm.
I have a friend, the guy that I run integration circles with, Eric, at this place called Polaris in the Bay Area, puts together the most exquisite playlists I've ever heard. They are just really good and really trustworthy. And there have been times when I was like, oh, I get what he's going for. I'm going to put my own song on now. No, I
Yeah.
just stick with Eric's playlist. It's really amazing. It's a guy's got a gift. I mean, he's also a very talented therapist as well, but he's got a gift for the playlist.
Yeah, I have some friends like that too. I'm not really good at making playlists myself, but I definitely have some good friends that I love what they do with that.
Well, okay, so what's the difference between a playlist and an album?
Well, I mean, it's a playlist, meaning to me would be, just my friend, getting 200 songs of a certain chill dance or whatever and putting it on, Spotify. Whereas an album is, a singular artist creating original compositions that have some sort of cohesive element that pulls them all together into a singular journey. The whole concept of albums is changing now because of things like Spotify and whatnot. Like, we don't have a physical medium that we're dependent on, but there's still something about having like 12 to 14 songs sort of strung together into a certain thread that makes it really, that's like the ultimate journey. It's a good album.
And how are you feeling about your ability to put that together? Because you described it very well.
Oh, thanks. But I think I actually, my last album I experimented called The Space Between, where it was right when the pandemic was, before it started, and I had this idea of, instead of releasing it all at once, to release a song on every full moon. And
cool.
Yeah, and then, but then that, when the pandemic hit, I was like, well, this is taking too long. I'm gonna do new moon and full moon. So I started releasing on the new moon and the full moon, and then at the end of it all, sort of brought it all together as an album. And that was a really interesting experiment to see what it was like, instead of just kind of releasing it all at once, to see how people would work with it. I'm not sure I'm going to do it again. There's a part of me that thought it was really cool to to have some relevancy or have a reason to reach out to my fans every couple of weeks. But now I am kind of thinking I might kind of change that a little bit and get back to being more releasing everything all at once, just because then you have an opportunity to fully understand what the journey is without having to kind of piece it together over time.
Right on. Do you so what is planned for next? Like, is there a show that's coming up? Do you have sort of anything that you're looking towards?
Yeah, I actually have 8 shows in May. So,
oh wow,
yeah, they're all socially distanced, all in Colorado.
Any interesting venues we might have heard of?
Cervantes, the Boulder Theater, and the Aggie in Fort Collins. All wonderful venues that I've always loved playing at. I have a long history at every one of those venues. I mean, Cervantes obviously is kind of pretty famous in the Grateful Dead and all that. But I am kind of hoping this is the last run of these socially distant shows. I think I'm ready to. It's a little weird. It's the closest thing that we have to feeling normal again. But I have to have 25 feet between me and the audience, and that means that's the dance floor basically. So there's nobody on the dance floor, which is kind of a head trip. It's just hard. It's hard to really feel like when I'm doing something that works or anything, you know, and just kind of guessing.
Right, as it's people are sitting in their chairs,
Yes.
you know, inside hula hoops.
Yes, and they're very far away, and often the lights mean that I can't actually see them,
Right.
and that could be a little strange. I feel very exposed, you
Mm.
know.
I have to
So
get you like a dead mouse mask or something.
yeah, I mean, something.
Yeah, I saw a socially distant show at Terrapin, with, you know, the family band there. And yeah, it was odd to, you know, to sit at the table and, you know, inside our box, and to kind of wave to your friends who are on the other side of the
Yeah.
field. And you know, it was nice to do something though. You know, it's still like, I mean, I sort of feel, you know, if I can tell you from a music consumer's point of view, I'll just be psyched to be out of the house.
Yeah.
You know, it's like people just like be so thrilled to see you. You could probably do anything.
Well, I will say that people are very happy. You know, they're like you
Mm-hmm.
said, that just to get out and to sort of do something. Like people are, and they're very, some of these smaller events that I've played have actually been just incredible because everybody's just so happy to finally get out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure you've seen those memes online of just like, you know, when we can finally go back to see live music
Mm-hmm.
again,
Mm-hmm.
and some picture of, you know, people losing their minds.
Yep. We were all talking about like what it's going to be like that first show we get to when we go to Red Rocks and there's no
Right.
restrictions, and what it's going to be like to just look around and hug your friends, and really
Mm-hmm.
like that's going to be incredible. Like, and I think that's almost going to make it all worth it to finally get that feeling again, because maybe we were all
Right.
taking it for granted.
And people can find out about that on your website, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. Well, I'd like to thank you for being here.
Yeah. Thanks for having
It's
me
been,
on.
yeah, man, it's been super great to talk to you and get your insights on these kinds of things.
Absolutely. My pleasure.
And so we'll just say goodbye to everybody here, and then maybe we'll just take a couple minutes in the back end with Skylar again.
Okay. Well, thanks so much.
Yeah. Hey, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us for Instrumental Breakthroughs. Again, you're watching on Deadhead Land Television. We'll be here again next week. And I am your host, Daniel Shankin. You can find out more about me on tamintegration.com. Thank you so much. Oh, visit Random Rab at Random Rab on Instagram and everywhere else where, I guess, wherever you can type Random Rab in on the internet, he'll be there.
Yeah.
Have a great week.